Profiles and Issues is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It is a show that profiles people and issues that affect the church in the modern world. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Profiles and Issues. I'm Father Jim Korda. Our issue is bullying. And to help me profile the issue is Mary Fiala. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Explain exactly what bullying is.
The definition of bullying really has three different components to it. It is some kind of mean and hurtful behavior. It is something that is intentional and repeated over time. And it also involves an imbalance of power between the bully and the victim.
Now, when we talk about bullying, oftentimes we think of little kids in school, but it's a bigger issue, isn't it?
It is a bigger issue. Many of the things that we encounter with children in school is that mean and hurtful behavior, that the unkind words, the little snubs, the little actions. That's kind of normal. That happens as children are growing and developing and finding their way. So we always address mean and hurtful behavior, but bullying is really a step beyond that. It involves that repeated. It's something that is repeated. It is something that is definitely intentional, and it's not against two people who are just fighting or just have a disagreement. There's really someone who is more dominant and has more power over the other person.
Now, how does one begin to address the issue itself? Is it because a parent complains, or a school official might contact you because they need help? How do you begin to really address the issue?
Really, the best way to address the issue is to be proactive and to be preventative. All good bullying programs start at the school-wide level. It really needs to be a change in the culture of the school. It needs to be a positive and accepting culture. And so a good bullying program really looks at that school-wide issue. They look at how they treat one another. They look at the kinds of things that they expect from each other. As a Catholic school, we have the gospel mandates behind us. And the first principle of Catholic social teaching is respect for the dignity of all human persons. And that needs to permeate all of our classrooms, all of our schools. And we need to have the adults modeling that kind of behavior towards each other and towards the students. So that's really the first thing, is to address those kinds of things. You also need to look at the rules that you would have and communicate for kids. There are several rules that we use in our programs. It generally involves a commitment saying, we're not going to bully. We are going to address that bullying behavior with one another. We're going to stand up for one another. So we kind of begin at that school-wide level. Once a school addresses that and talks together as the adults and figures out how they're going to create that atmosphere in the school, then the teachers begin to look at what's going on in their classrooms. And the teachers are key to the kinds of things that are happening in the classroom. They talk, one of the most powerful components in a bullying program is the relationship that a teacher has with their students. And many of the programs will deal with a classroom meeting where teachers address the different kinds of issues that have to do with bullying, that have to do with respect for one another, but it can go beyond that. One of the things that teachers find when they get to do that is they get to know their students a lot better. And what they find is that by knowing their students begin to feel safe, and that classroom environment begins to be a safe place as well.
What role does the internet play in all of this? We know that That's a very important facet, for better or for worse, in our everyday lives. And to using the internet for that purpose, do you discover that in the bullying?
Oh, that has become a major issue. One of the things about the internet, of course, is that once it's on there, it really never goes away. And that's a very, very difficult thing for kids to understand. So what the internet has done, it can take that mean and hurtful behavior to a new level and to a more public level, where more people can be involved in that kind of behavior, and more people are really affected adversely because of that.
You know, oftentimes in our, let's say in our Catholic school system, people would be just amazed that that would take place. But kids are kids, whether you're Catholic or non-Catholic. So why is it so important to address it within our school systems in particular, because of the gospel mandate that you mentioned?
Right, and that is key. We exist to pass on our faith and our faith traditions to our students. And Jesus was so clear as to how we are to treat one another as brothers and sisters. And so that has to permeate the atmosphere of our schools.
Now, I would imagine that some, and I'm not a psychologist, but some of the bullying that probably takes place, depending on what it is, can that be traced back to a child's family life or what's going on in the home?
There are a lot of reasons and the things that affect children before they come to us. Certainly, if they're experiencing difficult times, if they're experiencing bullying in their own lives, or maybe some of that imbalance of power in another situation, some students do respond by portraying that same kind of behavior in the workplace, or in the school, which really is their workplace. Parents, we really need to work with parents together to help to create that atmosphere of accepting and of not advocating that it is okay to respond in kind.
What about the influence of media, for example, the influence of television? Do you find that impacting on young kids today?
It is amazing to me the kinds of shows that I sometimes hear that children watch. And sometimes that has to do with a parent not being aware of what a child is doing at home, what they're watching at a particular time. Another area has to do with what they're playing or researching or doing on the computer. You know, one of the common things we've said to parents for years is you need to have your computer in a spot where that's around everybody's there. But you know, parents really need to be vigilant. It's a very difficult time to be a parent because our kids are very computer savvy, and so they can do a lot of things without a parent actually realizing it. And so one of the things that we really encourage our parents to do is to be just continually talking to their children. You know, how do you expect to treat one another? How do you expect them to use the computer? Or what do you expect them to watch on TV? You know, what are those different things that you value and you want your children to value?
Does law ever come into play in all this, like the legal authorities or police or lawyers? Does that ever come into play?
It certainly can. I mean, certainly we hope that, you know, we can monitor and watch a situation, but there certainly are situations where children have crossed the line that involve legal authorities. Many of the times it has to do with the internet and the use or misuse of the social media. What
is the greatest challenge in your position, especially in this whole issue of bullying, in dealing with parents, let's say, first of all?
I think one of the main things is helping parents to understand what bullying actually is and what it isn't. parents, because they love their children so much and don't want to see them hurt, anytime a child comes home and someone has said something mean to them, or something has happened that has been unkind, a parent's natural reaction is to defend the child and to perhaps make a bigger deal of it than it is. That said, we want parents to be monitoring and making sure that things are okay for their kids at school. And if it really does become something that is repeated and something that is being harmful to their children, then we definitely want them to be contacting the school. But a lot of times we deal with the first grader who goes home and somebody said something mean to them, and the first reaction said, "My child is being bullied." And you're right, your child, that should not have happened to your child. It was unkind and hurtful. It's probably not bullying, but we deal with it. No matter what it is, we do deal with it. And that's one of the advantages, I guess, of a Catholic school. We deal with it because we're mandated to do so by our faith.
We're down to the last few minutes of our time together, the first segment. What about the parent that really believes that their child is innocent, even if all of these things are happening and they're the bully? Mm-hmm. How do you get through to that parent that your child is not as innocent as they appear or you think they are?
Sometimes it takes repeated conversations and repeated examples of how things are going. I think whenever you deal with a parent, you also don't want to you want to recognize the fact that they do love their child, and maybe they don't want to accept that part. So I think if you are also talking with that parent as if you value their child and them just as much as you value someone who they may be bullying, I think that's an important thing to communicate to them. They'll feel respected, and that a lot of times will help to break down that barrier.
And briefly, what would be a challenge to an administrator or a teacher in that situation?
The biggest challenge is when you get to a point where you're almost agreeing to disagree, because there are times when you don't end up seeing eye to eye on a situation.
And what about the children themselves? What challenges do you face in this whole issue of bullying?
I think that our concern is for all of the kids, and so we try to help all of the kids understand what their role is and why they can't treat kids the way that they might have been treating them. And what we sometimes again have to do is, they may not agree with us, but we have to say, we just don't do this here. And sometimes, when it gets to that point, there are definitely disciplinary consequences that come with it.
Well, Mary Fiala, thank you so much for being on our show and enlightening us on this whole serious issue of bullying.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. To our show. Our issue is bullying, and joining me now is Alaina Chepke. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Father.
I know that you're in the classroom, so you have a wealth of experience with kids. And what's some of the warning signs that you've experienced about bullying, that kids are actually being bullied?
I would probably have to say you tend to see some of the children become a little withdrawn. Maybe they're not as willing to participate because they're a little intimidated by how they will be received by others in the classroom. Every once in a while, it could be another classmate that does actually step up because they've recognized behavior that they obviously are, identifying as not acceptable or unkind. Occasionally, it will come from a parent in a note or a comment from administration to let us know. But as far as the child is concerned, I think you can really see it in their face that something's just not right.
The one thing you mentioned is someone else coming forward. I think oftentimes there's that innocent bystander, the person or the child that sees this happening, but for some reason is afraid to come forward. How do you instill within kids that it's okay and it's important to step forward in these situations?
I think that's one of the most valuable lessons that we can teach those bystanders, is how to empower them so that when they do see something, they are willing to do so. We have examples in our classroom where we talk about what's acceptable and how someone could have helped the situation, because quite often the victim of the bullying may not step forward, and they need that voice of someone behind them to say, that's not right what you're doing. So giving examples to the students of how to do that. I know that personally we talk a great deal in my classroom about how we're a family. And just like a brother or a sister or a parent would help you when you're in trouble, whether it be you're sick or you just need help around the house, that it's something that they need to do for their family of friends that are in their classroom. And it's a remarkable thing when you see that actually happening.
Sure. What would be some of the things that kids do? I would imagine there's a fine line between just a kid being picked on and a kid being bullied. What are some of the things that would cross the line that kids would do to one another to bully them?
I think when they make the situation so difficult and uncomfortable for a child that they can't perform, they do not want to attend school, they may not want to be active in a group, and it's just to the point where it's so hurtful that they don't know how to shake it. They can't escape from it. And it could be just subtleties, it could be exclusion, the seat's taken, or I'm saving it for someone else. It could be, something much more. I like that pencil or the crayons and I'm going to use them, and it just happens in a variety of ways. And for some students, some things could be more upsetting where others might not, react to it. But for those that it is more severe, it is very damaging for them.
I'd like us to talk about the bully themselves. That obviously they have some problem that they're expressing in this unacceptable way. How do you deal with the bully themselves?
I found it to be, I would say, somewhat helpful to talk with them about themselves, not to talk to them so much as about the situation that just occurred, but just to talk to them to find out where they're coming from. Is there a problem in the home? Is there something they're upset about? Is it a problem that maybe they've had with other students in the building or other friends? To kind of get an idea of where they're coming from as far as why they would think that that type of behavior is acceptable and why they think that it is okay to be intimidating or to put someone else down. So I think once you establish with them that you're not just coming at them because you're angry or upset because of the behavior that they are showing, but you're concerned about them as well, and that you want to try to help them through this difficult time that they're having.
Now, in your experience, do you think that the one who's doing the bullying at some point in their life might have been bullied, and maybe they're responding in this unacceptable way? Is that an experience you've had?
I would say I think that could definitely be one situation. I think in others, maybe it could be something as simple as they're not used to trying to maybe take a back seat to see how their behavior is affecting someone else. Maybe they're not really encouraged as much to think about others or to think about what they are saying and that it is hurtful. Some of them, I believe, may not have an idea, and it's followed by, I'm just joking. Well, the student that's hearing it or the child that's hearing it isn't taking it as a joke. And sometimes if you point that out, that kind of puts a little bit of a halt to it as well.
What are some resources that are available, for example, to you as a teacher, but also to parents and administrators? What resources are there things out there that they could look at or study or understand a little bit better to help with the issue?
Yes, our school is currently instilling a program from the OAS group, and it's a wonderful program. We have all been in service, our staff. We have a secondary staff that will be in service as well. And there's a series of written information that you can turn to. There's videos. There are, scenarios and situations that you can put, children in, students in. There's a whole program that we're implementing where there's a lot of role play that's encouraged so that maybe before a situation occurs, we could empower those. The victims, sometimes they're not willing to stand up for themselves. But if we can get the other students around them to, say, hey, this isn't right, or we need to put a stop, or we need to help this person out because they don't have a voice that's strong enough right now, that they're able to do so. So I think giving students examples of behavior, and even parents of what is and isn't acceptable, could be a deterrent for bullying.
Let's talk a little bit about the parents' role. Obviously, parents, many times when their kids are involved in this, they take it extremely personal. And so how do you try to work with the parent to have their eyes open and their ears open that let's look at the entire issue. Let's see all of the different variables. How do you begin to speak to a parent?
Well, I think the training in the beginning and the information regarding bullying and bullying prevention is essential first. But a follow-up to that, I think our parents today are very much wrapped up socially in the lives of their children, that our friends become our parents' friends, and we're all together. And I think sometimes the parents aren't aware of, after a game, we're all going to get a bite to eat, and that some that are left out do feel badly. And I think that kind of engineers a little bit of the thought, we're just worried about what we're doing and we're not considering others. But our parents are very supportive, and I think as long as we're not taking an approach where we're coming across in an aggressive fashion, we all want a solution to the problem. So I think just getting the parents on board and getting their support through a variety of ways would be helpful.
Have you found kids that are bullied, that they get to a point where they just can't deal with the situation and they actually need to go to another school? Does that ever happen? I've heard stories of how that's happened. I personally have not had that happen in the schools that I've been affiliated with, but I could certainly see where a child that has not had an opportunity to have coping skills presented to them, and where there maybe hasn't been an intervention, where that could be very difficult. It's something that they don't want to have to face each day, and even if we tell them it's going to get better, part of, I think, their resolve is to say, I just don't want to be a part of that. And there might be an instance where that may be in a child's best interest. We would certainly not want that to happen. I think it's important for us to make sure that the victim knows that we are supporting them, and that what has happened is not their fault, and they have done nothing wrong. And we need to make sure that they understand that, and that they know that they are loved, and we're doing our best to provide a safe environment, and that all action will be taken to make sure that that happens for them. But it can be very difficult, I'm sure. We're coming down to the last few minutes of our time together, but I'd like to ask you, obviously kids are influenced by what they see on television and what is happening all around our country with aggression, with violence, with things that are out of control that affect them, in a serious way. How do you talk to kids about what's happening in other schools where, for example, the violence in Connecticut or different things like that could lead to that type of behavior? Is that our part of this issue?
I teach a younger group of students. So for my third graders, knowing that we're coming into school the next day and that there was a topic that happened in our world, current events, I wait to see how they're going to bring it forth to me first. And I try to encourage them that that's not the way that people in our world are supposed to behave. And we pray, and we pause. We pray for those that were affected. We pray for those who, were wrong with their actions. And I try to encourage them that there's a lot of good in the world, and that we have to be proactive in providing that good in the world. And we have circle time at the end of our days, or the end of our week, I should say, and we all gather together and we thank one another for spending time with each other, and we try to bring out the goodness and the good that's happening in our world. We can't ignore the bad. We can only try to reassure our youth that not everyone in the world is like that, and we have to just encourage them to look for the good.
Do you notice a difference between the older kids and the younger kids? Is there more of a tendency among older children to bully as opposed to young kids?
I think it's to different degrees. I think with the older children, it's more of an exclusion. It's more of an outward appearance, whether you're socially acceptable or not. For the young ones, it's more so, who are you going to play with today or not? So I think, it kind of varies, but there are still many instances where it's just, I'm saving this spot, or you're not invited, or you're not included.
And how important is it to give, and I would imagine for you as a teacher, to give equal attention to all the kids? It's probably not an easy thing to do, is it?
It can be challenging, it can, but at the end of every week, we have a special little routine that we do where everyone comes up to get their blessing for the weekend, and some try to duck from it, and there's no ducking, and everyone is encouraged to participate. I use a system in my classroom, many others do too, with names on flashcards, so nobody can say she's only calling on this one or that one. And I think it's just if the students see us modeling the fairness of behavior, then they do too. And every child, when we do our circle time, we go right around, and everyone knows by now they have to respond, and everyone is encouraged to support. There's no negativity, and they look forward to it. And it's a part of the end of our week, and they'll very quickly, is it time for circle time? They want to hear from one another and support.
Well, Alaina Chepke, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you,
and for adding so much to this very crucial issue of bullying.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Profiles and Issues was a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.